Hey crew, it's Bree, as always, and this is episode 4 of A Piece of Everything, Tower of Babel comic review. Yo, what's up people? How's it going? How are ya? It's great to be back talking to you all. It's been another week, obviously, and as they say, another week, another dollar. No, nothing? Okay. Anyways, as you guys know, and as I made it quite clear last week about how excited I am about this, today's episode will be all about one of the best Justice League stories of all time, and yeah, also one of the best DC comics of all time, JLA, Tower of Babel. And I am especially excited to review this because 1, it's our first comic review on the show, so that's huge. There will be many more in the future, but this is our first, so that's awesome. And 2, because this is the very first comic I ever read in my life. This is Ground Zero, and this comic is basically what snowballed into me being broke and spending all my money on more comics and making a podcast about all things comic related. So this is definitely taking me back a ways, and by back a ways I mean 2 years ago, I think. I mean, whatever the start of quarantine was, how long ago that was, that's how back far I mean. But, plus, it took me a minute to realize this. I've never reread a comic before in its entirety. So this was also my first time for that. So that was so fun. I loved it all over again. It was a great experience. So it's going to be a party today with that review coming up. But before we get to that, first, I have humongous news. You will all be so happy to hear this. In fact, the news is so big that we need a drum roll. So drum roll, please. Guys, this show has reached an all-time high of listeners as of a couple days ago, with the number of consistent listeners now being 7. Woo! Yeah! Okay, so we need to keep this morale running high, this amazing winning streak we have going here. We are doing great, so keep telling your friends, your family, or hey, even that neighbor across the street who you may or may not like. Tell him about the show too. I don't know. Why not? So spread the word. Let's get as many people as possible tuned in. We can do it. So that is really, really awesome. And also, something else to be happy about, and I'm proud of myself for this one, I started laying out how, the rest of the episodes are going to be working out for the show. Like a format for how everything else is going to be working. And I came up with a really cool idea. So, we have to hit Marvel, DC, and Star Wars on a consistent basis, right? That's the big idea here. So I was thinking, why don't we do something along the lines of a weekly rotation? Because that way we can get an even spread of each franchise we want to hit. So a few weeks back, we had our first episode, the intro, and then Star Wars for 2 weeks because Visions needed to be split up a little bit. And this week we're on DC. So then next week could be Marvel, and then we can get back to Star Wars again the following week after that. And then, because I did promise to throw manga and anime into the mix, that stuff can go into the rotation every other week. So I figured it would be cool to let you guys know what I was thinking about that and how that's all going to turn out. And I hope that sounds good to you. Planning it all out and seeing what's actually coming up ahead is really exciting because we're going to be getting to a lot of cool stuff. So make sure you're listening every week so you don't miss anything. Alrighty now, folks. Now is time for our weekly comic update. Woo! Yep. Okay, I'm sorry. That's the only sound effect I could think of that matched what a transition for the update, but we're just gonna roll with it until we find something more suitable. But until then, let's just roll with that. Okay. So, the first thing that I have to talk about absolutely is, of course, DC fandom. And I was super happy to hear that it would be continuing this year because I only thought it was going to be a COVID isolation thing. So it was nice to see it come back, and I did watch all of it live. And when I say all of it, I mean literally all of it. Every second, I watched it all live on YouTube. And then once I realized, as it ended, I realized I didn't even have to do that because each trailer and sneak peek and whatever ended up being released was ended up being posted by DC individually anyway. So, but at least I can say I watched the entire program. That's an accomplishment. But yeah, it was funny because Fandom was streamed literally the day after I recorded last week's episode, and I completely forgot it was happening so soon, so I didn't even mention it. So, I mean, if I had remembered about it, I would have, but I didn't, unfortunately, so that's why I didn't talk about it last week. However, my memory has returned to me this week, so I can talk about some of the stuff that came out from that, and no doubt you guys would like to know, so we can get into that a little bit. The first thing that we are all thinking of, we finally got another trailer for the Batman movie. And not gonna lie, that was the main thing I wanted to see coming into Fandom, and I'm sure that also applies to many of you. That was number one going into it. But somehow DC read my thoughts, and to keep me hooked for the full, 3 hours, they made it the very last thing they presented. No doubt on purpose. So, I see what you're up to, DC. Fair play. We all know that was the plan. But, of course, that was the highlight for me, seeing more footage of that film. And one thing that was noticeable this time around for the trailer was that we saw more of Zoe Kravitz as Catwoman, which was pretty cool. I can't wait to see how Matt Reeves, the director, how he chooses for Batman and Catwoman to interact this early on in Batman's Batman career. And having the Riddler as the main villain in this is super exciting, because the only time I've ever seen the Riddler be a main character in anything is in Batman Hush, the comic and the movie. So the prospect of a live-action Riddler is very exciting to me. Well, I mean, another live-action Riddler. He's been in live-action movies before, but I have never seen them. But and also with a modern, darker take. So that's going to be awesome. So the Batman trailer number 2 has me even more ready for this film. Just one more year, right? Yeah. Just one more year. But yeah, that was the big thing for me. And we also got to see a sneak peek on the Flash movie, which, I mean, none of us know when that's actually happening. It's going to be a while. But at the very least, we have something now, so that's good. And from the looks of it, I think we're going to be getting another Flashpoint here. And I mean, when you see 3 versions of Barry Allen standing next to each other, and the whole thing, with his mom again, and apparently Michael Keaton Batman showing up, which I didn't catch, but that's what I've been hearing. I have to rewatch it just to check. But when you see all of that at once, I mean, that's enough for me to be convinced of a Flashpoint event. So, and honestly, I would like to see that happen. I want to see how they would do that with this new Flash, and how it would work out with all the other Justice League movies being planned. So maybe they'll try folding it in and connecting it with other movies down the line. I don't know, but I think that's definitely possible. So we'll see with that, and it seems quite interesting. So that was kind of cool how we finally got something for the Flash. And on top of that, we got a Black Adam sneak peek, which was the first thing they showed, I'm pretty sure. A Shazam 2 look sort of thing, and a Young Justice Season 4 sneak peek, along with the release of the first 2 episodes. That was very cool, and they couldn't have done it at a better time. I was not expecting that. Plus, another episode came out on Thursday, so now there's 3 episodes out, and we'll be getting those weekly now for a bit. And I have watched the first 2 so far. I have to watch the third one, and I am liking it. There is definitely room for it to be better than the last season based on how it's going so far. I mean, there's not too much to go off of right now with only 3 episodes being out, but still, I could totally see it. And one of these days, I will get into some Young Justice with you guys, so we can touch on that more in detail once I get an episode out on that. So yeah, so that's just a few of the highlights from DC Fandom. And if you haven't seen some of this new stuff yet, including some stuff that I didn't mention, DC has posted everything on their YouTube channel, which I'm really happy about, so I can rewatch the Batman trailer as many times as I want. So you can find everything you need to over there. And yeah, with that, I'm guessing our weekly comic update is all wrapped up. So now, with the utmost pleasure, we can begin our Tower of Babel review. I'm so excited for this, guys. Now, before we continue, let me just say, I have been corrected on how to say this many times. I know it's technically supposed to be Tower of Babel? Tower of Babel. I think that's how it's supposed to be said, but that's not working for me. So, for my own comfort, Tower of Babel will do, so you'll just have to deal with it. But anyways, yeah, I am so happy to get into this comic, and yeah, it's what started me on my comic journey in the first place, as I was saying before. So it has a special place in my heart, very special. But the trade I have here for Tower of Babel, and we'll be reviewing today, covers Justice League of America issues number 42 to 46, JLA Secret Files number 3, and JLA 80-page giant number 1. I do not know what that means, but that apparently that's what it says. And it's written by Mark Waid and illustrated by Howard Porter. And, besides me, the general consensus on the story in general among the fans is that it's amazing. I've only ever heard great things about this from other people, which is very accurate. That's what it deserves. So this is looked at not just by me, but by everyone as an awesome comic in general. However, if you're not familiar with the story, basically the premise of it is Batman had created contingency plans on how to take out and seriously immobilize each member of the Justice League based on, their weaknesses and tendencies. And Ra's al Ghul and his daughter Talia, they get to these plans and they use them against the League to get them out of the way so that he can, execute this world order / population control plan, which involves, causing chaos and wiping out a whole lot of people. So, there's that. So what are the things about this comic that make it so good? What makes it one of those great Justice League stories and one of the Batman Hall of Famers? Well, first of all, I love the choice of characters that were used in the first place for this. I mean, we have a prime lineup of DC heroes here. And this story is what introduced me to characters like Plastic Man and Kyle Rayner as Green Lantern, because I had only been familiar with Hal Jordan as Green Lantern based on, the animated films I would watch. And we also have, Aquaman, Wonder Woman, Wally West as the Flash, Martian Manhunter, and, of course, Superman and Batman. And I loved seeing them all together in one spot. It was just the coolest thing for me. And I think it's a great iteration of the Justice League, one of the best. So that's one thing. And also for the art, there's something about this type of art style that I always just like. I mean, when you compare it to the art that starts to surface just a few years after this comic is made, it's quite different. I mean, this is still very early 2000s, so you didn't start getting the digital looking art until a little bit later. But I mean, something that I noticed about this the first time around, and also this time as well reading it, is how the art allows the characters to be so expressive with some of the facial expressions they make. When Batman finds out that Ra's took his parents' caskets, I have never seen Batman's eyes get so wide. I mean, it was just really interesting and also kind of perfect for the crazy things that were going on in this comic book. So it was just really fitting. And even though I do prefer the newer styles of comic art, it's stuff like Howard Porter's art that still makes me love how this slightly older style and coloring looks. So hats off to him there. But overall, to the actual story, at first glance, the whole feel of it seems to be bad guy wants to kill a whole lot of people, so he gets the good guys out of the way first. But the issue becomes much, much more than that. And really, the center of the story is trust. I mean, that's the theme. And I love that because with the way it's written, it has so much depth to it in terms of what trust is and what crosses the line of trust. And also what people who you do trust do with that trust. I mean, I definitely said trust too many times, but you get the idea. And as Talia, Raz's daughter, as she's flashing back towards the middle-ish end of the book, as she's flashing back to how she got Bruce's contingencies from the Watchtower, she makes the point that this is pretty cool actually. In the Watchtower teleportation system, there's this thing where you can teleport to any member of the team's secret location in an emergency, and that anyone at the Watchtower could find out where you lived if they wanted to. And Talia actually uses it to get to the Batcave. So, I mean, when they say you can go anywhere with this thing, you really can. But no one has ever done that because of respect and privacy. Because in the laws of moral sense, there's lines that you just don't cross out of respect for someone. I mean, there are just those things that you never do and places you never go out of consideration and friendship, which, I mean, the Justice League members, they all work so closely together, so they should all be friends, which they are. But Batman just goes right over those barriers without remorse, and he takes what each of his friends, and I'm, like, using quotations here in my... you can see the quotations in the audio. His friends, because by the end of this, they're all super mad at him. But he takes what each of his friends trusts him with, and he twists it on them in the most imaginative and horrid and crazy ways. And that's what really gets everyone upset, is how they trusted him with their intimacies and tics. And all he heard in those conversations was how to use it against them. And he never really saw how they were each trusting him and how much they wanted to be his friends. So, I mean, that's a key issue we see throughout the comic, as the story goes. And there's another flashback where we get taken to, different conversations Batman has with certain members of the League, like individual one-on-ones. And you can see how Batman is so sneaky. I mean, he would slide in keywords and questions that would, unknowingly prompt them to give up all their weaknesses. And it's so wrong. It's the most invasive you can possibly get. But the whole concept is so genius, and it's the coolest thing ever. But, I mean, that's why the Justice League feels so wronged by this whole thing. Their side of things is that, we trusted you, Batman, and you turned that trust against us. But then Batman's side of things is also super logical, too. I mean, his reasoning is that there have been times before when the Justice League has been under mind control, and they did crazy things through means of someone else, through, mind swaps and stuff like that. So if that were to happen again to the most powerful metahumans and aliens ever, Bruce is saying that they need plans to stop them before any serious damage can be done. And he actually said that everyone else is fools for not doing that. I mean, there's a part where we get another flashback. I keep bringing up the flashbacks. They added so much to the story. I loved them. And they didn't even take up that big of a space in the story. It was only for half an issue or something. But it was very good material to use, so I loved them. But anyway, so in this flashback, Alfred walks in on Bruce concocting all these schemes, which then it is when it hit me that actually Alfred did know about all of this happening, and he didn't say anything, but it's not his place, I guess. But anyway, he walks in on him, and Alfred asks him, do you believe that, the League is even thinking about doing this sort of thing to you? And his exact response was, if they're not, then they're fools. So it's just wow, in his mind, this is an absolute, and it's so justified to the point where he sees no way around it. He feels like he absolutely has to do this. And it's the best because we see so much of Batman's personality and his thinking process and what he's like from this comic. And in other words, we see how serious of a paranoia problem he has, because that's really what all of this is. He wants to be ready for every possible situation that could possibly happen. And that's understandable, but I mean, all it is a question of what if you get mind controlled and what if we need to use these plans. He's so paranoid of a person that he's willing to go so far based on simply a hypothetical. And the more you read on Batman outside of the story, outside of Tower of Babel, the more you can see that that's just his character. His paranoia is what makes him have all these trust issues, and it's that paranoia that influences a lot of the decisions he makes and the way he goes about looking at things. Which is a shame, because he's moved to think of everyone that's ever cared about him as, ticking time bombs. It's only a matter of time before I need to take you out somehow, some way. And it's kind of sad, because that's just the way he looks at things. And there is a moment where he said, I'm always looking for ways to counteract my enemy's methods. So, I mean, you can see that, Bruce looks at his teammates and his friends as potential enemies when he should be seeing them as friends. So it's pretty sad in that sense, but both sides of how to look at it are so logical and so well thought out that it makes you question, which side would I take, if this was real. And even with the issues Batman has, we all know he has issues, I would have to ultimately say that I would side with him because, I mean, absolutely, the whole spying aspect of it just isn't right. That's just, you can't really get around that. But I can understand that there's too much of a risk to take by assuming that a situation will never come up and that you'd never need a failsafe for, metahumans going crazy. Because then how stupid would you feel when things go wrong and you need the plans? So, I mean, it makes it really hard to choose between both sides because there's downsides either way you go. And I know I've been talking about Batman a lot because, he's in the middle of all of this and, it's his plans and everything else with him being kind of against the Justice League. But it hit me that when you really think about it, he's not in the comic as much as everyone else is. Like, he doesn't even show up, and we don't really even see him until Superman calls him to tell him that they're all being attacked, to which he responds by abruptly hanging up, which, again, is such a Batman thing to do, but still, I mean, but a story is really written well, and it's really good when the character meant to be the focal point of the story isn't there all the time on every single page. Like, I mean, how is that possible? But I mean, it makes sense, and it's done perfectly. So that was something noteworthy to me that I didn't catch that last time, but that's how it seemed. But, I mean, I guess that roughly covers everything I just adored about this comic, about Tower of Babel. Now, was there anything I didn't like about it? I'm gonna say no. But, there is this tiny but. The only thing about amazing stories like this is that when you have two main focuses or subplots going on at the same time, that's when I start getting slightly confused at some points, and I have to remind myself what's happening and why are we here and how do we get there? Because one, you have the Justice League getting attacked and all of them in bad shape trying to recover, and then at the same time you have Batman trying to see what's up with Ra's al Ghul. And the whole world going crazy because he's made it so that they can't read or understand words, hence, the name Tower of Babel. And they both have very much to do with each other. It's not like they're both not connected, because they are, and very logically. But I just had to stop once or twice and think, why are we in the Himalayas again? What's going on with Pakistan? What's this about a virus? And of course, it's not terrible at all, but I mean, there's probably a lot of you who didn't even have this problem, but that's just how I read, where, I need to retrace sometimes and go back and remember why certain things are happening. So, I mean, that was the one thing. Plus, and I promise this is it for things I didn't like as much, the last thing that comes to mind, that I wasn't totally convinced would have really happened, and when I say that, it has to be said in a relative sense, because we are talking about comic books here and not real life, but the only thing was when Wonder Woman gets a hold of the League of Assassins terrorist dude who's about to unleash the deadly virus to, bring down the population. Wonder Woman, with the help of, the lasso of truth, she's able to talk him out of executing the plan. And I mean, I feel like the guy might have still pulled the trigger and went through with the original plan, but it made enough sense how Wonder Woman kind of negotiated him out of it. But, I mean, still, I kind of felt like a League of Assassins member over anyone else would be willing to die for, a cause of saving the world from itself, in, Ra's al Ghul's words. So, I don't know. I mean, it still worked for me, just not on a perfect level, if you know what I mean. But nothing else bothered me. That's pretty much it. But, I mean, moving on from that, something I do want to mention is the character development of, the characters in the book. And that in itself was a 10 out of 10. But the funny thing is, I wouldn't really call it development because there wasn't necessarily anyone growing by the end of the story. I mean, I would still say that everyone is still the same person they were at the beginning. But I would say that each thing that each person did gave us such insight into who they are as a character and how they think and tick. And besides Batman, obviously, I think the best example of this was shown at the end, when we got to see how everyone voted on whether to keep Batman either in or out of the Justice League. And I'm so glad we got to have this moment, because it's obviously a super important part. And what makes it even more great is how highly anticipated it is by the time it comes around, because everyone has been upset for the last good part of the story. So now we want to see like official reactions and explanations from each leaguer in their own words. And it all kind of boils down to this decision, to this part of the book. And I mean, just to be taken through each member's thought processes and to see how they individually digested Batman's actions and whether they were punishable by expulsion or not, it made the personalities shine through even more than they already were at this point. And like having Wonder Woman think of the whole ordeal in the format of a battle and how she would never go into battle with someone she didn't trust. It made so much sense because that's how you would think an Amazonian would think, or how like a warrior princess would think about it. And so you understood why she voted to have bats kicked out. Or with Kyle and what he was saying about how even though he was furious, which was apparent, he could still understand why Batman would make plans like he did due to his personal experience of being kind of sort of chosen at random to have the most powerful weapon in the universe. And all it would take is for the wrong person to be wearing the power ring. And in that case, when you think about it like that, you need somebody to be like that to be taken out with a plan like the one Batman made for him. So in that case, he understood and was able to like respect Batman's choices in that way. And one of the even better parts that we can apply this to is when it's Superman's turn to vote. And of course, he's the deciding vote. We all saw that coming. And Wally, he says to him, "You're the closest thing Batman has to a friend out of all of us. Does he know you well enough to know how you'd vote?" And when we see that Batman left before hearing the results, that answers the question. I mean, yes, he definitely would know. And Batman leaving before the outcome of the vote is cast is the most Batman thing you could possibly do in that situation. Because, like, on one hand, he kind of has, like, I don't want to say arrogance, but that's really what it is. He has an arrogance about him where he's not going to sit there and let you tell him how you voted him out of the Justice League. And on the other hand, he also knows Superman so well to the point that he knew he'd be the deciding vote and that Clark's vote would be to have him expelled, which is also why he left, since he knew that it would come down to that anyway. So just in that scene, we see the type of person Batman is and the type of things he would and wouldn't do. And we also see Superman's personality at the same time, and also the Batman and Superman dynamic that we all just love. It's a really good moment for, the both of them. But you get the point. There's a ton of information implied and like subtly alluded to in the writing of each character that it conveys so much at once. And I couldn't have seen it done any better than it was. So, but coming out of this comic, especially with it being my first, it supplied me with enough to know how these characters act and who they are and like what the essence of each of them essentially is. So I absolutely loved that. And I can't praise Mark Waid's writing enough here. It's just amazing. But the only lingering question I have after everything is, did Batman make his own contingency plans? Like, make plans for himself? Because, I mean, we can't forget, he did get attacked as well, not physically. But the only thing I have to go off of in regards to trying to answer this question is the animated adaptation of this comic, which is Justice League Doom, if you didn't know. And if you haven't watched that yet, please do yourself a favor and watch it. It's so good. Definitely a favorite in the animated DC realm of things for me. And, for a long time when I was little and before I cared about comics at all, Doom and the Christian Bale Batman trilogy was basically the only DC intake I was getting, so I absolutely love that movie. But, it's definitely different in a few ways from the comic version. You'd be able to notice them if you watched it, but, it still gets the same the concept through of trust and everything else, so I absolutely love it. But in the movie, Superman asks Batman, were you so arrogant that you didn't bother to make a plan for yourself? To which Batman responds, I have a plan. It's called the Justice League. And I love that part. So that leads me to believe that he didn't make his own plan, at least in the movie. But in the comic, Ra's said that he was not the one who thought of taking Bruce's parents' coffins. So that leads me to believe that he did make his own plan in the comic, which, if so, that should have made everyone at least a teeny bit less mad at him, but they never brought it up, so I'm guessing not. But, it's probably just different in the movie than in the comic, so, I'm just gonna go with that. But, I don't think he made his own plans in the movie, but I think he did in the comic, so, yeah. But in regards to, like, the overall pacing of the comic, and how everything was, with the speed of everything, I think it was right where it needed to be. And if we don't count the little side stories at the beginning or the end of the comic, which I don't know if you guys had that in your trades, but it's in mine. The actual Tower of Babel story, it didn't waste any time getting into the main crux of everything. And there was never a point in the comic where you felt that things were going so slow and you had to trudge along through the next issue or the next few pages to get to an interesting part again. Now I have to mention, when I say that, I'm not including the little side stories we got at the beginning and the end of the comic, because if you didn't happen to like those stories, that might have been what it felt like for you at those parts. And I'm not sure if some of the newer or older collections of Tower of Babel are different, but in the trade I have, there was an opening story with Ray Palmer and the League, and how they had to shrink down into, like, this kid's brain and, like, evacuate a microscopic civilization out of his brain. And at the end, there was, like, 2 more with an Aquaman and Wonder Woman team up, and one with, like, Superman being framed for a murder. So, it wasn't exactly straight to the main story if you count those, but otherwise it definitely did. But I still enjoyed those little shorts, I guess, you could call them. They didn't end up having any significance on the Tower of Babel story, so I remember I pretty much, like, skipped over them the first time I was reading this comic. So you can always do that if you don't care about it, but having read them this time, I really liked having them in there, so I enjoyed them. But yeah, the pacing was awesome if you like to get, like, straight to the main meat of the storyline, and it holds your interest the whole way. And a favorite thing about it for me was how intriguing each method was to immobilize each person. That really grips you when you see that unfolding. And the ideas of each plan themselves seemed so simple, but they had a lot of complicated elements to them, which is why it was such a pain and hassle to get out of each problem, courtesy of Batman. And, like making Aquaman, the man who breathes water, scared of water, like that's so genius. And Martian Manhunter getting set on fire whenever he was, like, in contact with air, that was really brutal. And to freeze Plastic Man, I honestly felt horrible for him, because not only did he get frozen, but he also got swung at with a hammer and was broken into a million pieces. So his was probably the worst on, like, a pain scale level. So, I understand why he voted Batman out, just for that reason, and just how painful that must have been. And I also felt the worst for Wally, too, because he basically got shot, like, in the neck, and became stuck in a series of, like, seizures at light speed, I think is what they said. So, that was horrible, and tough to watch, honestly. Plus, Superman does not look too good when he's near Red Kryptonite, just saying, he looks bad. But, it all makes the point of how much thought and planning went into their demise, which is so interesting. But, it goes to show the story wasn't predictable. Although you could have probably taken a guess at the beginning and said the League would most likely make it out of everything alive somehow, in the moment of each of them, like, lying on the floor in pain, you couldn't really see how they would get out of the mess of a situation they're all in. So it kept you turning the pages to see how everything would turn out. But, now, just isolating the ending of the story a little bit, I think it was super fitting. And the thing about it, it's not your typical ending, because there's not exactly closure, per se. And that's because, you never have Batman actually confront the problem or really face the people he betrayed, because, that's just how he works. He would never apologize to anyone in this situation, and he wouldn't ask for forgiveness either, so it totally fits his MO of leaving off on a note where he's annoyed at everyone else for not doing what he did, and now he's just not talking to anyone. So that's what we call Batman brooding. But, I mean, something they do show at the end, though, that I wouldn't have thought of otherwise is how Batman's actions against the League ended up affecting the rest of the Bat family, meaning like all of his proteges, past or present. Because by the end, word has spread enough in the superhero community of what Batman did that now the Titans are wondering if Nightwing has been keeping notes on them, and the Young Justice team is looking at Robin as if he's spying on them for weaknesses in their powers. And even with Barbara Gordon, who's Oracle at this point, I mean, nobody's contacting her for anything, because, like, you know, what if she's using her network to spy on all the other heroes? And it's ridiculous how people start assuming like that, but it's so realistic. I mean, people really would jump to conclusions like that. And, you know, to be honest, they do all the time. But now Batman has not only dragged himself down, but the rest of the Bat family as well, because he's made them look guilty by association. So it's not even just Batman's problem anymore. He's made it everyone's problem to either be constantly looking over their shoulders to see who's watching them, or now he's made their reputation a little smudged because of something they never did. So the ending makes you feel a little unsettled and wondering, like, how is this ever going to get patched up? And the truth is, I don't even know, because this comic actually takes place in the middle of a bigger Justice League run, and I never finished the rest of the run. So unless you read on into the next volume, this is how the story ends for you. So, I mean, I do have the rest of the JLA trades now. I was able to get my hands on them, but I mean, I guess I could if I wanted to, like, look into how it continues from here. Plus, I've heard amazing things about the entire run in itself, so I would highly recommend reading on if you'd like an extension on the ending, and for just more great Justice League stories. But all in all, this was such an engaging and enjoyable read. And I remember I read the whole thing in a day, so I could not put it down. And I really wish people talked about this story more, because it really deserves the credit of being as amazing as it is, and how key it was to each of these heroes' characters, and how they act down the line after this, especially Batman. I mean, this is kind of an essential story for him. And also with this comic, another awesome thing about it that I wanted to mention is because it was my first comic, it also means that when I read it, I had absolutely no DC comic knowledge at all. I didn't know who Kyle Rayner was, I didn't know who Wally West was, and I actually thought Barry and Wally were the same person, and I did not know the difference between the two of them at all. So that was, I didn't know anyone. I had never heard of Ra's al Ghul or Talia before. I mean, there was just so much I did not know, but that's kind of the beauty of it. You could not know anything about DC like me 2 years ago, and read this comic and still loved it. I absolutely loved this. So, you know, whenever I think about, like, first reads for someone who would like to get into DC, or maybe for someone who would like more DC stories just to start off with, I would totally recommend Tower of Babel as an option. It would definitely 100% be great for that. So if you know someone who wants to get into DC, or if you yourself want, like, more JLA stories, or DC related stuff, this story isolated and also the whole run is also one of the best options to go with. So if you want to look for the rest of the run, just look it up by, like, searching JLA run by Grant Morrison, and then you'll find all the other comics you need to complete everything else. But I hope you enjoyed this comic as much as I did, and as much as I do. It'll always be one of my favorites. I love it so much, and I'm so happy I got to talk about it with you guys. Thank you for listening to me ramble. But if you liked this one, chances are that you'd also love the OMAC Project, which is another comic that dives deep into the things Batman's paranoia can lead to, and, I mean, that also takes you to Infinite Crisis as well. So I definitely love to get to review that comic, because it was very, very good and very interesting. And actually, I was wondering whether I should tackle Crisis on Infinite Earths first, for some background on Infinite Crisis, or whether I should just get into Infinite Crisis stuff. So, I mean, on that note, I did make a Google form for you guys to do. It's just asking, like, which story you'd like to hear first, just to get some tallies out to me as to what I should do about that. So yeah, guys, I want to tailor it to you guys. What do you want to hear? But I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. So please vote on it, so I can see what you think. So yeah, unfortunately, I'm sad. That about wraps everything up for today, my peeps. As always, thank you all so much for listening in this week. And as always, if you want to contact me or would like to leave a review of your own to be read on the show, don't forget you can send those over to apieceofeverythingreviews@gmail.com, and also tell people about the show. Please, go ahead. And also, I'll be seeing you folks next week for a review on the Wolverine Origin comic from Marvel Week. So, if you love Wolverine like everyone else on the planet, then stick around. That's going to be so cool. I can't wait to talk to you guys about that. And it has been a blast. And until next time, it's Bree. And always remember, never trust a Batman. Just kidding, Batman's the best. Bye!